It's time to kick off TNT with a banger, Map 1 System Control. One thing to note is the level seems to take some inspiration from Entryway and Hangar with stairs leading up to armor on the right and a twin pillar room on the left. Another thing to note is you're given a berserk pack, and I guess that's what the level expects you to defend yourself with. Thankfully you can get a shotgun, so that's not too big of an issue. This level also shows that Final Doom isn't messing around because you've got at least one chain gun commander to deal with on all difficulties. It also has a weird mechanic where you have to hug the locked door to open a hidden door as a mandatory mechanic, but it's not anything that really detracts from the level. Overall, it's a pretty fun little starting map. Let's all have a bite of Map 2 Human BBQ. This level very much raises the bar over the first level, both in terms of size and difficulty, especially on ultraviolence. It has a pain elemental in addition to a revenant guarding the door, not to mention chain gunners and cacodemon and the like. Like Doom 2, the second map introduces the super shotgun, but you have to go through slightly more resistance to get it here. In addition to difficulty, this also shows how the map makers will utilize glitches, such as the deep water effect, which is pretty cool as long as you don't die in it. The tower in the main courtyard area is also a nice touch, and the level overall makes good use of verticality. Overall, it's a nice if somewhat sharp escalation of tension and hammers in the fact that Final Doom really isn't playing around. I'm placing it above system control. It's time to wield some Map 3 power control. The level starts out pretty small, the shotgun sergeant for a pistol start shotgun and some other small enemies as a warm-up in addition to a chain gun. It doesn't take long though before you see the main area of the level, a large area with a central tower and 4 smaller ones around it. Fortunately, you do have some cover here, both the door you came from and the stairs circling around it with windows. You just have to clear everything out. The level also further ups the ultra-violent stakes, introducing main cubi and an archvile, though at least the archvile's in a cage, so its resurrection is very limited. Not every part of the level is great, especially the ledge past the red door, but it's generally engaging and solid. Credit where credit is due, the first few levels of TNT are an upward trend for quality. I'm placing it above Human BBQ. It's time to go spiraling into Map 4, Wormhole. Right from the start, you're surrounded by shotgun sergeants, which really sets the tone for this level. Even more so if you go for the rocket launcher and suddenly have 6 chain gun commandos on you. Weirdly though, the level goes for super tight corridors after that makes dodging projectiles more than a little hard. This sort of mirror world is a neat concept, but with the exception of some catacombs, it's just copy and paste with new enemies. I think it would be better if it was like Dark Ether from Metroid Prime 2 with some more twists on the geometry. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a terrible level, but the over-reliance on tight spaces hurts it a bit and it's just not as engaging, so it's going below Human BBQ. It's time for Map 5 Hangar, not to be confused with Doom 1's iconic Hangar. Perhaps they should have called it Tenements 2, because it starts out with the same hug far-end wall to open a hidden door a few times at the very beginning, except worse because it's tight with shotgun sergeants. It's known as that one spot that makes life absolute hell for pacifist runners, and not very pleasant for the rest of us either. If they didn't already spoil your appetite for hit scanners, the next area has a window open up to them. Well, at least you can quickly close the window with a switch if you know which one to press. The level also has some mild Spirit World type shenanigans going on with a mandatory secret wall to find a key. If that wasn't enough, you have to press some dark squares to get lifts to fall that you have to figure out to get the key. I personally don't deem it as bad as Spirit World, but I could see an argument for it. Relying heavily on hit scanners and obscure paths forward, it's the weakest so far and going right below system control. It's not Wabbit season or duck season, it's open season. Or maybe it's Doom Guy season because you're at risk of hit scan perforation right from the beginning. The rest of the level is fairly bland and forgettable to be honest, focusing mostly around a lava room with what looks like machinery as well as an abundance of cacodemons. There are also a couple of dark areas that are like a worse version of what Nuclear Plant was trying to do, and it does make use of verticality, but there really isn't anything to say apart from that. Overall, it's a fairly weak level, albeit not nearly as irritating as Hangars, so it's going above that. It's a shame though, the first 3 levels were getting better and better, and these past 3 have been relatively duds. Let's hope it gets better from here. It's time to get out of Map 7, Prison. You get stuck in a dark room. Oh joy, but at least you get a plasma rifle too. It does brighten up for the actual combat, and once you get out, there's a pretty wide open area with moats of lava. The next area of note is an area surrounded by cages. You have to find the dark blinking wall to press its switch to open another corner's wall, hit its switch, repeat until you finally reach the key and teleporter leading out. It's creative but also kind of irritating. It also doesn't help that the enemies firing at you from within the cages are on all sides in pitch darkness, but at least an invulnerability sphere you can grab going in does help with that and not getting bombarded. The level's exit requires you to skip along platforms of equal level, and there's no wall to stop you from going too far and straight into the lava, so it's pretty irritating too. Overall though, as much as a meh the level is, at least it has some interesting design elements, so I'll place it above Open Season. Right now it's all about the Map 8, Metal. To understand how this level operates, I'm going to say to you that this is not only the best level in TNT Evilution or Doom, but the greatest level in all video gaming. Psych, prepare to get surrounded by chain gunners, you little shit. You may have caught on that this level is sort of about cheap-shotting you, especially with hit scanners. The last area of the level is straight up a massive room with shotgunners and chain gunners flooding it. Admittedly though, I'll give it a little credit for switching things up and teleporting you when you reach for the next floor-raising switch. That's actually a surprise I found entertaining. Overall though, the level seems more interested in cheap surprises, and I think the level design kind of suffers for it. It's not the absolute worst, but I am ranking it below Open Season overall. It's time to cut through Map 9, Stronghold. And cut through is right. This is another level that is completely filled with hit scanners, which means a lot of shotguns and a lot of chain guns firing at you as always. However, I'm not so salty that I'm just going to condemn an entire level just for being tough. To the level's credit, it actually has some reasonably tight design, and using the same missing texture trick as the deep water to make invisible windows is kinda neat. Even though the effect becomes completely broken when you're opening and closing them. Despite the abundance of enemies though, I'll say it mostly avoids cheap surprises with one noteworthy exception. Overall, the enemy spam can be a bit much, and it can be confusing to navigate, but it's still an alright level as a whole, and I'd put it above Prison. Right now, maybe Map 10 can stay true to its name and give TNT Evilution some redemption. In some way, it actually does. One thing that will probably become clear is that it has a lot of surprise, now there's monsters moments. Of monster closet, monsters behind pillars, and cacodemons through the windows variety. One kind of cool thing though is that it uses the deep water effect to make enemies rise out of the ground suddenly. Unlike the Human BBQ one, you're likely not going to break this effect without no-clipping. While it's still leaning pretty heavily on the surprise traps, it's a well enough structured level that I'm feeling pretty lenient, so I'll place it above Wormhole overall. This field trip is to Map 11 Storage Facility. Maybe it's because some of the previous levels were so relatively mediocre and my standards have dropped, but I was actually pleasantly surprised with this one. It starts out very unassumedly, just a small dark room with a shotgun in it. I definitely didn't imagine that the curve around would suddenly open up into a fairly big outdoor area. All things considered, the enemy placement also feels a lot more fair here, mainly a chain gunner and revenant as immediate threats. One clever thing is a rocket launcher trap with a teleporting in archvile, but if you're inquisitive enough, you might notice a megasphere his fire can launch you towards. Probably the one fault I can find is the circus clown car of teleporting enemies can get dull, but that's ultimately a minor gripe. While it isn't perfect, it actually surprised me with how engaging it is, and I'm placing it above power control, placing it at the top so far. Today we're getting stuck in Map 12 Crater. Honestly, it's not a bad place to get stuck in because it's a very solid level. If I really want to nitpick, there's an arachnotron behind a ghost wall, but that's in an optional area and at least plasma is an instant. Other than that, the level's reasonably straightforward and it surprises like a blue key trap surrounded by corpses with a mancubus and plenty of cover for dealing with him. Maybe the outdoor area is a bit on the sprawling side, but it's certainly got scale going for it. Probably the most potentially challenging enemy is an archvile that drops down, but you get a rocket launcher in a previous area, so he's a pushover if you conserve ammo. There's also a decent amount of optional areas here, with a super shotgun and soul sphere awaiting the bold. Overall, it's a well put together level with relatively little to complain about. I'm placing it right below storage facility. It's time to scramble our DNA in Map 13, Nukage Processing. It isn't the easiest level in the world to pistol start, but shotgun sergeants and later chain gun commandos at least provide an opportunity to arm yourself with. Interestingly, while there are windows, none seem meant to trap you like the one in Hangar. One I'd even say is practically required if you wish to deal with a cyber demon that would otherwise be in a cramped space. In this level's case, the use of a spacious outdoor area I feel adds to it with all the enemies initially around. One funny thing is you can go straight outside and dash for the yellow key right at the beginning via a secret. I feel like that would possibly benefit speedrunners more than anyone else. Maybe I'm just getting used to TNT's quirks at this time, but I actually found the level enjoyable overall and would place it just below power control. right now it's time to get pressed by the steelworks. This might sound harsh, but this might just be the worst aspects of TNT Evilution all rolled up into one. For starters, you've got relentless hit scan spam, including a spider mastermind at the level's end. Then there's mandatory damaging floor tracks that make against the wickedly look generous, not to mention under crusher ceilings, and the few radiation suits are a poor bandage. The most generous I'll say for it is it has some okay level design, like the crates in the beginning and the Blood Falls machinery past that. The unfortunate part about that, though, is I have to judge it as a level to play through, not a visual set piece, and it's a massive disappointment in that regard. Move over, Hanger, because we've got a new champion for the absolute worst, going below that at the bottom of the list so far. It's time to get sucked into Map 15, Dead Zone, not to be confused with the Garlic Jr. variety. Gonna be honest with you, if there's one word I could use to sum up this whole level, it's confusing. Now, technically, once you know what you're doing, the level can be beaten really fast. There aren't really any keys of the like though, so it's more or less press a switch here and something else will happen somewhere else. I even stumbled into the secret exit before I realized I'd unlocked the normal exit. Basically, when a donut wall opens up and an archvile comes after you, that's when the normal exit's unlocked, but you can find the secret exit pretty quickly too behind a couple of secret walls. Overall, it's not a bad level by any means, and it's got some alright design, but the switches can be somewhat confusing, so I'm putting it right below Stronghold. Let's all render onto Map 31, Pharaoh. This one was a little bit difficult to place. It has some interesting things like the arachnotrons frozen in place until they wake up, but also some other not so pleasant spots. You know things are going to be hairy when the start of the level floods you with almost every weapon and a ton of ammo. Easily the low point is shotgunners behind windows. There is a difference between being hard and being cheaply shot from nowhere hard. At least have projectile enemies you can trace the locations of, that's all I'm saying. A dark room with specters actually caused me to change the lighting mode of GZ Doom because they were straight up invisible, which was causing a real headache. The end of the level straight up floods you with shotgunners teleporting in. Yep, there's more cheap hit scan spam. Overall, it has some highs and lows, with the lows arguably outweighing the highs, so it's going below Dead Zone. It's time for a vacation in Map 32, Caribbean. This is the Doom guy's idea of a vacation, then I guess he became addicted to a bloodbath even before Doom 2016. Probably the weakest part of the level is actually nearing the end. It has you going through muck, but at least it's non-damaging. The area just prior had a monster mash teleportation in response to raising a bridge, so it feels like the muck might be Dario running out of ideas and just wanting to fill the level out. At least the finale horde was fitting, including a Saber Demon, though I wasn't a big fan of the archvile behind the wall. I'm not the biggest fan of the two-switch exit either, but at least it's unique and seems to require smart use of the teleporters. I'll place it right above Stronghold overall. It gets a little weaker later on, but it's still an alright level, and the water base is a nice change of pace, even if it can't hold a candle to Duke 3D's Life as a Beach. Grab your mining helmet for Map 16, Deepest Reaches. The best way to describe this level is it's an amalgamation of different level styles, combining a cave, a wooden building, and a hellish marble castle. In terms of pistol starting, you start with a shotgun sergeant and 2 imps in a cramped room, so it can be a slight hurdle to get over initially. I'd say the weaker elements of the caverns of the wooden building, while the marble hell castle is more interesting. There's especially a pretty cool optional area cultivating with a dark room by candlelight and exploiting a bug grabbing items through thin walls. It actually took me a hot minute to realize I already had the red key. It's only a shame that the other areas in the level feel like filler in comparison. Overall, it's a pretty non-offensive level with some solid design here and there. I'll place it right above Dead Zone. Today we're tackling Map 17, Processing Area. I'll be honest, there isn't that much to say about this level. What's probably the most noteworthy part is the blue key platform that can leave you stranded and confused if you didn't use a nearby switch to raise a bridge first. Other than that, you've got the expected hit scanners, revenants, and the like. There's 2 sections with teleporting in enemies, which isn't really that surprising anymore. The secrets are probably the most interesting thing about this level, like a computer to lower a lift to get into a main courtyard with a fountain. On one hand, it isn't a flat-out terrible level, but it is pretty forgettable, which might just be worse. Overall, it's a competent base level, but there's not really much excitement going on. I'll put it below Pharaoh. It's time to get ground up in Map 18, Mill. I will say this, the level makes interesting use of voodoo dolls to grant you invisible weapons when you cross certain lines. Sadly, that's the only positive thing I can say about this fittingly named grind of a level. For starters, the level actually has the audacity to potentially trap you in a room with an archvile. The first time it happened, I was lucky enough to have RNG to stun it with the super shotgun, but that's obviously not a consistent strategy. Then the ending of the level has the worst kind of enemy teleport spam I've ever seen. It was far more of a chore than engaging due to expected hit scanners in the midst. The rest of the level was more wanting to get it over with than having much in terms of enjoyment, really. The one genuinely positive emotion I felt playing through this level is relief when it was finally over. It's going straight to the bottom of the list. It's time for one confusing map named Map 19 Shipping/Respawning. This level actually pleasantly surprised me, especially aesthetically. It actually looks like an attempt was made to make it look like a real location by Doom standards, including office chairs, pallets for crates, and even wheels on a delivery truck. The funny thing is it has a monsters teleporting in sequence and an archvile like Mill, but both are far less frustrating. The teleporters actually block the monsters from leaving, so you basically have to shoot the existing ones for more to appear, in addition to having better cover. Naturally, the archvile also doesn't lock you in a room with it, so it isn't up to luck to survive it. For being the 19th level on Ultraviolence, the challenge is actually very fair since you expect hit scan spam by now. Overall, it was a surprisingly good map with a pleasing aesthetic. It's going right above Nukage Processing. Today is the time for Map 20's Central Processing, not to be confused with Doom 1's E1M6 of the same name. Honestly, the level starts out alright for the most part. It has a few unique areas like shooting through a sort of office and trekking through brown sludge and the like. If it ended just past the yellow key door, or even just past the outdoor mode area, it would be an alright level. Sadly, to say the last area of the level goes downhill fast would be an understatement, with a slog through long winding pathways that just seem to waste your time. The concept of teleporting through a few previous parts of the levels before reaching the apex is cool, but it doesn't compensate for this trek. It's not the worst level in the world, but it's also nowhere near the level of the Doom 1 Central Processing, and I'm placing it below Metal. It's time to manage Map 21, Administration Center. The most noteworthy part of the map, at least for the positive, is that missing texture glitches are once again put to use, this time for transparent doors. Admittedly, there is also a pretty cool moment where the room darkens and a beating heart alto rises. Other than that, the level's not especially exciting, with treks back to the brown sludge pit in the center a few times for keys to get into more areas. The outer halls being as unwinding as they are just seems plain unnecessary. The final area is straight up a massive space with, you guessed it, hordes inevitably teleporting in, including a cyber demon. Like the one before, it kind of fumbles at the ending, but at least it's better designed overall, so I'd place it just below Prison. Today we're observing Map 22, Habitat. This is a pretty infamous level, which I can understand because it's definitely not winning any beauty contests, but I wouldn't say it's the absolute worst either. By now you're going to expect hit scanners everywhere, the oddball archvile revenants, the works. Of note is a system of underground water tunnels, almost like a significantly more cramped and ugly version of the underhalls. There are attempts at grassy hills, but it somehow looks significantly rougher than even Minecraft. Still, there was an attempt, and the level does have some optional areas to look around in, even if it weirdly just gives you some secrets through the doorways. Visually, it's very much an eyesore, but at least the gameplay of the level doesn't drive me up the wall, so it's going right below TNT Central Processing. Prepare to drill into cheese rock because this is Map 23, Lunar Mining Project. This level may be at its most interesting on a pistol start due to an archvile outside through the windows. Well, it's not exactly impossible to whittle him down. Ammo is scarce enough at first that I just avoided the windows for a little while. On top of that, a couple of the rooms have a bit of that shipping/respawning charm with trying to make a real-world location, computer stations and bedrooms with closets. The mining caverns themselves, though, aren't as interesting, although jumping across gaps at least forces you to pay attention. Most interestingly, there's twin barons you have to go through for an invulnerability sphere. I like the idea of an archvile providing a looming threat through the windows, and the level is well enough designed on its own, so I'm placing it above Redemption. Grab a pickaxe because it's time for Map 24, Quarry. If there was ever a map that was meh, this would probably be it, down to having drab rock textures everywhere. I get it's a quarry, but the abandoned mines on Doom 2 manages to look far more visually interesting. While it does have some white and red rock textures in places to add a bit of contrast, in addition to lava and red sky, it's not enough to make the level not feel so samey. It's a solid and competent level, mind you, with only a bit of mandatory hazard trekking to serve as a mild nuisance. It's only a shame then that the level doesn't really have anything that's truly interesting beyond maybe an invulnerability sphere. The best way I'd describe the level overall is relatively white noise. I'll place it below TNT's processing area because it's similarly forgettable to that, but PA has the edge in being more visually interesting. Let's grab a torch and peer into map 25, Baron's Den. At first glance, it seems like just another mediocre underground level like the Quarry. However, Baron's Den proves it can be more varied and have more tricks up its sleeve. One such example is a spacious area, interestingly enough, with 2 lava containers above a pool of water. The level is mostly devoid of the titular barons, but it makes up for it with 8 of them in the rooms leading up to the exit. The exit itself is even a fake out just to expose that final baron. On the subject, I will say that in general the gotcha moments this level has didn't irritate me anywhere near as much as many previous ones did. As a whole, it relies a bit too heavily on brown grassy caves for my liking, but it has enough tricks up its sleeve to put it just under Pharaoh. Today we'll be blitzing through map 26, Ballistyx. I hope you enjoy punching specters down twisting hallways because the game gives you a berserk pack, so unless you have ammo coming out of your nose, you'll want to use it there. Probably the most interesting part of the level is the part where you get the yellow skull in, not only because of the abundance of red-hot inferno, but because of the sheer enemies you're surrounded by. Another interesting spot though is a copy of the altar at the beginning with an archvile nearby. If the archvile makes it to the teleport line, you might want to trek back to the level start because moving forward is a teleport and you don't want to get caught in the open with an archvile. Most of the level can be pretty uninteresting, but at least it has moments like this. The level is overall a mixed bag. It has some interesting ideas, but not all of them land. I'm placing it just above Baron's Den. Prepare yourselves for a world of pain, aka map 27, Mount Pain. Pretty much everything about this level seems to be flipping you the bird, and if you're me, making you save scum aggressively. A perfect example is at the beginning of the level where pistol starting means dealing with a crusher ceiling to arm yourself. From a level design perspective, some of it is alright, but the trick through the brown sludge is not only another middle finger, but just ugly aesthetically. Kinda fitting that the most unique part of it is just text saying disaster area for a door marker. The end basically just throws everything it can at you with revenants, hit scanners, lost souls, and an archvile in the actual mountain part of the level. Ultimately, I would compare it a bit to Steelworks. It has decent level design for the most part, but relying too much on sucker punches, and it's ultimately a chore, but I'll still place it above Mill because at least it doesn't lock you in a room with an archvile. Prepare the sensors because it's time for map 28, Heck. The level starts out kind of crazy, surrounded by 4 revenants, but thankfully you can seek shelter. If you inquisitively turn around, you might notice some weapons around your starting point, which makes things a whole lot easier on a pistol start. One part of this level that gets a ton of bonus points for me is that it's a find 3 keys to unlock the exit in any order kind of level. These are so rare and I love the non-linearity it provides. The 3 sections themselves are fine with an appropriate amount of challenge for being level 28. I wasn't the biggest fan of the pain elementals getting the yellow skull key, but that's a minor gripe and they can be worked around. One is straight up like the maze from Courtyard with a bit of archvile hunted for good measure. After the mountain of pain of the previous level, it's kind of funny how this one is so satisfying to go through. It's going to the top of the list. It's time to go for a dip in map 29, River Styx. Unlike the Baron's Den, this level wastes no time getting to its level namesake with a journey through a river of blood. If you think the blood's inconsistent in its damaging factor, this level bafflingly has non-damaging lava in it. It's not the worst thing ever because at least it's consistent within the level, but it's still kinda weird. Its most unique aspect is probably a crusher section that reminds me of a section that would later be in Romero's Sigil coincidentally. It climaxes nicely with a big room with Mancubi and Arachnotron and a tower with an archvile. Overall, I'd consider it a good enough pre-boss penultimate level that feels similar to the Living End on Doom 2, just not nearly as good. It's going right below Crater. Better order your drinks now because it's time for map 30, Last Call. While it has an icon of sin, it distinguishes itself from Doom 2 and Platonia actually by having more of a marathon run beforehand, and the icon of sin is just kinda there. I find it interesting that it uses teleporter lines and a voodoo doll to make a platform hopping puzzle, but I can see how others might dislike it just a little. Here's a tip, you can actually cheat and get around it with no clipping if you really want to. Most of the level isn't that special really, mainly revenants and a cyber demon, and you should be well acquainted with all of those by now. The icon of sin itself is kind of weird in that the spot to shoot is actually slightly below the visual spot, and mouse aim actually hurts more than it helps. All you need to do is center the mouse, go to the second to the top step, and let her rip. It's not the best, but it does beat Doom 2's icon of sin. I'm placing it just above the Lunar mining project. That is it as far as TNT Evilution is concerned. Honestly, the quality of the levels is all over the place, and perhaps its sour reputation isn't entirely unearned. Mill in particular was just grating and had possibly the worst cheap shot in all of commercial Doom in my opinion. That being said, I have to give it credit for being willing to experiment with ideas, especially the clever use of glitches and having some mostly excellent original music tracks. As I always say, Doom never has enough of those non-linear find 3 keys to get to the exit map, so that just makes me appreciate Heck all the more. Basically, while TNT Evilution certainly has its fair share of flops, it also has a good amount of levels that are either decent or just genuinely good. Your mileage can certainly vary though, so I suggest trying it out for yourself and coming to your own conclusions. Maybe tell me in the comments section if there are any levels I put too high or too low.